We are going to talk about the role of divorce in God's plan. If you enjoy this video, please like, comment, and subscribe.
Some people believe that when divorce happens, especially in a community that values family life as much as we do, that something has gone terribly wrong with God's plan. And that's a fair thing to ponder.
Sometimes when people get divorced, they think, now what is left to me? Plan B. And the idea is really painful. It tends to intensify the pain of divorce. And I think this does come, like Cathy said, from our religious values, which value marriage higher than almost anything else, except maybe God Himself. And so we tend to get to a point in our life where a marriage has broken down, perhaps after a long period of time, and we begin to think, the gospel isn't really working for me. It's not really doing what I felt I was promised. How many times have we heard someone say, I did everything I was supposed to. I went on a mission. I got married in the temple. I paid my tithing. I stayed active in the church. And I was told that if I would do those things, life would pretty much work out for me. When it doesn't, it's a big crisis of faith for a lot of people.
It is, and understandably so. Especially if that's the premise with which we've been working, maybe subconsciously.
Again, the central question that many ask is, how could divorce be part of God's plan for my life when the plan of salvation is so centered on marriage and family life?
Every 3 months we have a fun Lily dinner with all of our Love in Later Years group members and followers. And at our most recent Lily dinner, we had a friend of ours mention her philosophy on divorce being likened unto the grafting of the olive tree. Do you remember that, Jeff?
Yes.
That was so insightful. I personally got revelation in the temple for myself that both of my first marriages and subsequent divorces were part of my life path. And that revelation for me was so helpful every time I wanted to question that experience, every time I had regret or I was tempted to feel regret and remorse and wish things had happened different. I could just remember that was part of the plan. That was part of the path for me to become who I need to be. I had never really thought of it being true for everyone, but when she said this, I had this instant thought, yeah, that makes sense. It wasn't just me, it's everyone who experiences divorce. It's part of our path to experience trials and challenges in this life and grow from them and learn from them. Agency is a part of the plan. People make choices. We don't get to control other people's choices, and that's a hard lesson to learn, and divorce is certainly one of the places we learn it really well.
We need to remember the book of Job in the Old Testament describes Job as a perfect man, and he is tried first by losing his wealth, second by losing his family, and third by losing his health, almost to the point of death. And it wasn't done as a punishment for sin, it was done as a test of his faithfulness. You may recall that in the story, many of Job's friends were sort of ruminating about, what must you have done, Job, to bring this on yourself? What great sin must you have committed to be suffering these terrible hardships? Well, I think sometimes we tend to believe that if we do everything we're supposed to, that hardships won't come our way. But that's not true. That's not doctrinal. In fact, I think we have great things in our doctrine to help us address this question. Do bad things happen to good people? For many churches, people believe that plan A was for Adam and Eve and the human race to subsist forever in the Garden of Eden in this paradise. That's not what we believe. We believe that the fall of Adam and Eve was part of the plan, that it didn't thwart God's plan, it was the plan, that we were always meant to live in a fallen world and gain knowledge and experience from being here. If that was plan A, don't you believe that maybe divorce was part of the plan for you? That maybe the hardships you've experienced are things that in the long run are going to be for your best good?
The fall of Adam and Eve allowed our eyes to be open. It allowed us to learn good from evil.
One thing Cathy and I share in common is that we each lost a sibling to death at a young age. Cathy lost her youngest sister, I lost my youngest brother. And my brother died a pretty excruciating death from a brain tumor at age 17. It was a very difficult thing to watch. Now, my brother was funny and good-natured and kind and a really good kid. You see something like that happen to a person like that, and you wonder how life makes any sense. Now, I think it's normal for someone when they've gone through something like that to say, I feel pain because I lost my brother. He was a big part of my life, and now he's not here anymore, and I miss him. I think that's a normal thing. The real issue, though, is what kind of judgments are we hanging on that? Are we saying he was too young to die? It wasn't meant to be this way. The plan of God was somehow thwarted. I have to believe in faith that God knew what he was doing, that he allowed this to happen to my brother because it was his time. And there were things God wanted him to learn and ways in which he wanted him to grow. And I have to say that through his experience with suffering, my brother did become exceedingly compassionate for other people that suffer in many different ways. And I saw his character grow as just a kid to the stature of a giant.
I don't know how this happened, but when my sister was in the hospital and she was in a coma, and as we started learning more about her condition and that she wasn't going to make it, somehow during that whole process, and even as we planned her funeral, even though I had no idea this was coming, it was totally out of nowhere, I had this overwhelming feeling that it was her time. And that feeling gave me a lot of peace. It gave me a lot of comfort. It helped me heal faster than if I had thought that it was wrong. I mean, it can be very easy to think those thoughts because of all the things you mentioned, Jeff, about the things they lost out on. They didn't get a chance to marry. They didn't get a chance to do all the things, have children and all of those things.
Right.
But if it's their time, I mean, I just prefer to believe that when people die, it's their time. If divorce happens, it was part of the path. That's my preferred way of looking at it.
Cathy, I think that sometimes when it comes to things that a person couldn't really help, like my brother's brain tumor, we're more accepting of the idea that, well, God must have known something we didn't, and so he allowed that to occur for the person's best interest, maybe even in ways we don't understand. But I think when human agency is involved, we're much more prone to be hard on ourselves. And whether it was me that chose to end the marriage or my former wife, well, I think we can be very judgmental of ourselves in those situations rather than accepting that this may be part of God's plan.
And whatever shame we might feel about our divorce could also lead us to blame our former partner. And that's a very common practice as well. Usually all of it's done out of this embarrassment and this shame that we feel when a relationship doesn't work out and we think that it should have.
Yeah, I think part of the answer to this question of how could it be that divorce was part of God's plan for me? Well, why was the fall of man and woman part of God's plan for all of us? We live in a world that's messy and chaotic, and there's all kinds of things that go wrong. And we're meant to be here in that experience, in the whirlwind, and use God as our anchor and draw closer to him. I think if you're sitting in church and you say, I'm a better man because I was divorced, people will look at you like you've got 3 heads. And yet, it is part of God's plan for improving us.
I would believe it. Because I know the growth that can come when we intentionally choose to heal, elevate our lives, and become a better person through what could otherwise make us bitter.
There was no plan B. Suffering, mistakes, misuses of human agency are all part of God's plan for us. And if we know anything about the atonement of Jesus Christ, we know that it's all about second chances. Look, I don't think Cathy was my plan B. I think she's my plan A, and she always was. And because we were divorced, we had a unique way of being prepared for each other. Maybe isn't within our orthodox understanding, and yet for us, that's true and meaningful. Our paths through this life were not conventional, I suppose, but they were our paths. They were what God ordained for our best good.
And we've talked about the fact that had we not gone through those experiences, if we'd met earlier in life, it wouldn't have worked. I mean, we work because of what we've experienced and how we've grown from it. If you've been through a divorce but you haven't yet found your final match, but you want to, just keep in mind that the person you're becoming now is in preparation for a really wonderful person in your future.
Yeah, Cathy, I am not living out Plan B. We aren't living out Plan B because our prior marriages didn't work out. Those prior marriages prepared us for each other. So there is no Plan B. God knows what He's doing. No one can trick Him, nobody can fool Him, nobody can thwart His grand designs. We all have our human agency. We can choose to accept or not the experiences and the blessings that we all are entitled to receive. You know, I've said this before, and I'll probably say it again. Each of you were or can be anointed to become kings and queens. And at Love in Later Years, we're not here just to help people heal some emotional trauma and help a few people get married. That's all part of it, but it's bigger than that. We're here to create kings and queens. You can become the king or queen that it was your destiny to become if you understand that all of these experiences you have been given, even the ones that caused you to suffer, were to make you the person you're becoming.
You know, I tend to think that we had agreements in the former life with people we meet, especially the significant relationships we have here. And yes, we have agency. Yes, we make choices. God is not going to override our agency, but He knows us intimately, and He knows the kind of choices we will make. And He puts people in our path. He orchestrates the experiences that will be for our highest good. I really do believe that He can do that and allow us to make choices and have our agency. We might be very tempted to point a finger of blame to maybe agency that was used unwisely, but whatever that agency was, whatever that experience was part of our learning and growth. I don't mean to be insensitive, because I know some of that agency can cause really horrible trauma for people. We do have a Savior, and He's not only there to help us repent of our own mistakes, but He is also there to help us heal.
Right. I love the verse in Romans 8, the Spirit bears witness that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, that if we suffer with Him, we shall also be glorified together. That's ultimately the promise that we can cleave to, that we can take as our anchor, and accept and understand that the sufferings of this time do not compare with the glory that will ultimately be revealed in us. So take hope and remember that any time is a great time for more love in your life.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'd love to hear from you. Comment if you have any experience with divorce or loss. We would love to hear your story.